Tech cocktail sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
Well, thank you, Frank. First of all, let me just say how humbled and honored I am to spend these couple of days with you. It's inspiring. You guys are inspiring. The optimism, you know, everyone's talking about how terrible things are. You notice when we're together as a group, that's not the conversation we're having. I mean, incredibly optimistic about the future. It's wonderful to collide with all of you. Also, to learn about the downtown project. I mean, what a blessing. I mean, such a special project. You know, I think the killer trend of this decade is self-organizing, purposeful networks. Self-organized, purposeful networks. We've got the self-organized part right. We're connecting with each other. We're using social media to get to know one another, to exchange ideas. We're just getting started on the exciting part, which is the purposeful networks part. Putting these networks to work. You know, we don't have to wait for institutional leaders in the public or private sector for the change that we can bring about ourselves, and it's starting to happen. And we watch what's happening in Egypt. We watched how the SOPA legislation was brought down. These were self-organized, purposeful networks, and I think the Downtown Project is a perfect example of putting that to work. I'm really just an innovation junkie. I mean, I eat, you know, sleep and breathe this stuff. Whether it's small little things like taking the cab, you know, from the airport the other day and getting the scenic route here to the downtown area. I mean, there's got to be a better way, right? I mean, you're fellow innovation junkies. Everything you do, you're waiting in a supermarket line, whatever it is, there's always a better way. I mean, that's the blessing of being an innovation junkie, or whether it's big things. You know, you drive by our urban public schools. It makes me want to cry. I mean, how did we let that happen in this country? How did we let that happen in this country? So if you're an innovation junkie, like I know you are, we can do better. We have to do better. We don't have to invent anything new. What's getting in our way is not the lack of technology. We have more technology than we humans know how to use. I mean, I'm glad we celebrate invention and new technology, and I hope we keep doing it. But the truth is, we don't know how to use the technology we already have to solve the really big problems we have, like education, for example. We can do better. We should be transforming our public school system. We should be transforming our healthcare system. So I have been studying this, and I created what I call BIF, the Business Innovation Factory. It's a nonprofit. We've had about 5,000 like-minded innovation junkies, individuals, organizations, and communities that want to go up the learning curve to understand and practice R&D for new business models and social systems. We know how to do R&D to develop new products and technology. We don't know how to do R&D for new business models and social systems. Why aren't we trying more stuff? Why aren't we experimenting more? This is the Innovator's Day. I really believe that. During tough times that people have mentioned already this afternoon, we get a hearing. People want new, fresh thinking. You know, they want bold ideas right now. This is our window of opportunity, and that's really exciting. That's the good news. The bad news is we've turned it into a buzzword. We've turned innovation into a buzzword. Everybody's an innovator. You know, everything's an innovation. And of course, if that's true, no one's an innovator and nothing is. We have to get underneath those buzzwords. And that's what I've been trying to do. And we don't have all the answers. We're just trying to go up that learning curve. I'm going to tell you my personal journey. I think I might be the oldest person in this room here. And I think the goal for all of us is to get better faster. Right? Every single day. If you don't wake up and you don't spend the day getting better, you're falling behind in the 21st century. I've used up probably half of my 9 lives across both the public and private sector. My wife would say more than half of my 9 lives. I started in industry, worked for one of the major pharmaceutical companies. My claim to fame was being the product manager for a product you may have heard of called Prozac. I usually say we were successful despite ourselves, but it was an amazing, amazing opportunity. It was a marketer's dream. We changed the way people think about depression and affective disorders in this country. It's amazing what happened. But what I took away from that experience was the difference between what I call market makers and share takers. Most of the world is comprised of share takers. These are the people and organizations that compete in a defined marketplace. They keep track of who they compete with. They protect every share point. They do everything they can to get one more share point in an existing market. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with share taking. But where are the market makers? Where are the people and organizations that don't settle for the way markets and industries are defined today, but understand that we have technology available to us today that we can create entire new markets? We need more market makers. That's been with me my entire career. I then went off and became a road warrior consultant, spent about 25 years first with Arthur D. Little, then as a senior partner at Accenture. I have every black and blue mark that you can possibly imagine in what it takes to work with senior executives to try to create significant business model change. Significant business model change. And the truth of the matter is, I'm still learning what I learned all those years, but the truth is we got it wrong. I got it wrong, for sure. We had, I call it a process model. I thought that if I just yacked, long enough and loud enough, that I could convince you to change, and I could convince you to change. If I wrote one more consulting deck, right, I could convince you that you should change. It's not true. It's not true. I think what you have to do are find people that want to change, that are wired to change, and connect them together in purposeful ways. Stop trying to convince people and organizations that don't want to change. They're not going to. They're not going to. They're too busy pedaling the bicycle of the way it works today to reimagine and reinvent it. So find people who are, find organizations that are, and connect them, give them the tools, give them the platforms so they can reinvent, so that they can reinvent. After I came out of consulting, the firm had gone public. I had been traveling around the world, hardly at home most weeks. And I had asked my wife if I could take a year off just to catch my breath and figure out what I was going to do next in my career. She agreed, and after about 3 months, she reneged. There was no job opening for a strategy consultant at home. That job was already filled. So I had to find something else to do. And so in this next phase of my career, I became an accidental bureaucrat. I made the mistake of raising my hand to the then newly elected governor, previous governor of the state I live in, Rhode Island, and asked how I could help. And he put me down into the Economic Development Agency for the state of Rhode Island, first as the #2 guy, who ultimately went back to Wall Street, and then he asked me to join his cabinet and lead the agency. So I had avoided government like the plague for my entire career, and the next thing I knew, now I'm sitting in state government with the opportunity to rethink a local economy in a state, the smallest state in the country, where it looked like a real-world laboratory to me. It looked like a platform or a place where we should be experimenting with new business models and social systems. This idea of R&D for new business models and social systems. Why aren't we using our small size as an advantage? Because we're too small to compete with the bigger states and play the game the way everyone else does. Why don't we change the game? Why don't we become market makers? So I spent 6 years in the public sector. It changed my life because I had spent almost 30 thinking about innovation through the lens of a company, And now for the first time, I was thinking about innovation through the lens of a community. And that changed my life. It was an epiphany for me because you could see the way the parts moved, the way the public and private sector worked, the way colleges and universities interacted with companies, interacted with government or not. Is usually the case. And so for me, it became an imperative to think about how could we connect the dots horizontally? How could we get more collaboration muscle where we could experiment with new education systems, new healthcare systems, or new business models for organizations? And BIF became a response to that. I was out giving this talk a lot, and some of the innovation gurus that I looked up to, guys like Clay Christensen was mentioned before, John Seely Brown, out here on the West Coast, were encouraging me, saying, Saul, that's a good idea, a real-world laboratory. The conditions where you could get ideas off of the whiteboard and actually put them into the real world to see if they work. Because if we don't experiment more, we're not going to transform any of these social systems. So BIF became a reality. We've got about 5,000 innovation junkies as part of our network. We're working on projects all over the country in each of these social system areas. We run a smaller, more intimate TED-like conference. This is where I met Tony the first time. He's spoken at it 3 times. And it's pretty inspiring. I'll leave you with 3 words that we think comprise what we call the BIF genome. If you really want to transform something, don't think process reengineering, think genetic reengineering. And the 3 words are connect, inspire, and transform. Connect, inspire, transform. Connect, because innovation is a team sport. This idea that Tony talks about to increase collisions, we call it enabling random collisions of unusual suspects. Random collisions of unusual suspects. Tony's absolutely right. The gold is in the gray area between us. We spend way too much time in our silos. You have to get out on the edge if you want to get better faster. And if you want to get better faster and create new ideas and new solutions, right, you're going to need more collisions. So how do you create the conditions for that? So connect is really, really important because that's where innovation happens in the gray space. Inspire. We have to become inspiration accelerators. Right? We have to inspire ourselves and each other, and I think storytelling is the greatest tool. You notice everyone up here told stories, about themselves, stories about what they're doing. That's what we connect to. That's how you create an emotional connection. That's how you transform things. The most interesting companies I know are not companies, they're movements. Right? One of the reasons I'm so impressed with what Zappos is doing is because I think it's a movement. I really do. I don't think of it as a company. People want to work there. People want to come here and be part of this downtown project. It's creating a movement. Don't think company. Think movement. And lastly, transform. I'll just share a couple of thoughts about transformation. We're a country of tweakers. We love to tweak stuff. We love to make incremental changes to the way things work today. That's not good enough. If you believe, like I do, that if we're going to create the 21st century we want, if we're going to fix our healthcare system, our education system, our communities, these are not tweaks. You can't take the way it works today, throw technology at it, and hope that we're going to get the transformation that we want. You need to create the conditions where you can experiment with entirely new models, which is what's going on here in the downtown project. The first thing you need to do is change your lens. Because if you don't change your lens, the best you're ever going to get is incremental change. I think the lens you want is the lens of the end user, the customer, the citizen in the community, the patient in the healthcare system, the student. Why don't we have these end users at the center of our design process, right, so that we can create true transformational change? And the last thing that you need to do, I use the technical term, try more stuff. We beat that out of ourselves. We don't experiment enough. Right? Because we all lived in organizations that never rewarded us for trying and failing. Right? How are we ever going to learn anything new if we're afraid to try, if we're afraid to experiment? We should be experimenting all the time, all the time. One of my favorite quotes is by Steve Blank. Some of you probably know him out at Stanford in the entrepreneurship space. He says that startups are temporary structures to iterate business models until you find one that's repeatable and scalable. I think the comment was made earlier about that. That is so true. I mean, why are you writing a business plan? Why are you writing a business plan when you know that you're going to go through 8 or 9 business model experiments before you get to the one that's repeatable and scalable? We need to try more stuff. We need to get comfortable with experimentation. So if we want to transform anything, connect, inspire, transform, it really is the Innovator's Day. I really think we can do this if we just connect ourselves in a purposeful way and make it happen together. So thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts with you today.